Welcome to day 2 of our whole class reading sessions for Wednesday the 6th of January for Year 6. Today we're going to look at some inference, but before we can do that, we need to make sure we've read the first 2 chapters of the book. Chapter 1, Flames Across the Water. 9 robed figures dressed all in white, heads covered with softly pointed hoods. Against the black of night, a single wooden cross blazed. Reflections of peppery red flames shimmered across the otherwise dark surface of Kilkenny Pond. 2 children, crouched behind the low-hanging branches of a hulking oak tree on the other side of the pond, watched the flickers of scarlet in the distance in fearful silence. Dressed only in nightshirts, Stella Mills and her brother Jojo shivered in the midnight October chill. Stella yanked the boy close, dry leaves crunching beneath his bare feet. "Shh," she whispered, holding him tightly. "Don't move." Jojo squirmed out of her grasp. "It was me that saw 'em first," he protested. "You'd still be asleep if I hadn't come to get you, so let me see." Stella covered her brother's lips with her fingers to quiet him. Even though her toes were numb with cold and she knew they needed to get out of there, she could not take her eyes from the horror glimmering towards them from across the pond. "Do you know what would happen if they saw us?" she whispered, shifting her stinging feet, the crushing of dry leaves seeming far too loud. Jojo pressed himself closer to her in answer. Besides the traitorous leaves, Stella could hear a pair of bullfrogs burping to each other, but nothing, not a single human voice from across the pond. She could, however, smell the charring pine tinged with... what? She sniffed deeper. It was acrid, harsh. Kerosene! A tail of grey smoke snaked up to the sky, merging with the clouds. "Who are they?" whispered Jojo, stealing another glance. "The clan." Just saying those words made Stella's lips quiver. The Ku Klux Klan. Here. Here! What are they doing? Practicing, I think. For what? Stella paused and smoothed his bushy hair, trying to figure out the best way to answer. Jojo was only 8. "Nothing good," she said at last. A horse whinnied in the distance. It sounded nervous. And there, in the shadows of the trees across the pond, Stella could make out 6 of them. The flames must be scaring them too, she thought. The horses began to stamp and snort as the fire flared. Stella inched forward, trying to get a better look. One of the harnesses seemed to sparkle in the darkness. Or was it just a stray ember from the flames? The men in the white hoods were now all raising their arms to the sky, and they cried as one. But their exact words were muffled by cloth and wind. "Jojo, we got to get out of here," she whispered, now edging backwards. "Should we tell Mama and Papa?" Jojo asked. Stella did not answer her brother. Instead, she caught his hand in her tightest grip and ran. Chapter 2, Swift and Silent. The family sat huddled around the only table in the house with Dusty, their brindle hound, curled underneath. Stella loved the feel of that table. She loved to trace the circular patterns in the warm brown wood. Made of elm and built by her father when he married her mother, the table was large, sturdy and dependable, and so much more than a place for meals. It was a sewing table for her mother, a place to clean fish for her father, the battleground for many family games of checkers, and even a pretend track for Jojo to race his 2 wooden toy cars. Stella, now nervously circling the burl of the wood grain at double speed, thought tonight could be the one when she wore a hole clear through it. She looked from her mother to her father to her mother again, telling them for the second time exactly what she and Jojo had seen. Papa had run outside fast as a shot to see for himself as soon as she had awakened him. When he got back, his hands were trembling. His words were short. "Red fire, black cross, white hoods. They're here, now," he told Mama. It was 1932, and in the town of Bumblebee, North Carolina, tucked in the rocky bottom of the Blue Ridge Mountains, miles of stone-clogged farmland and forest all around. Folks on Stella's side of the town worked as maids and cooks, janitors and sharecropping farmers. A few lucky men had got jobs at the lumber mill, the only real industry in town, but they weren't allowed to handle the saws, only the boards and the sawdust. Every Negro family in Bumblebee knew the unwritten rules. They had to take care of their own problems and take care of one another. Help from the white community was neither expected nor considered. It was as it always had been. "Are you sure they didn't see you?" Papa said again, brusquely, rubbing his hands over his unshaven chin. "No, they didn't, Papa," Stella replied, her finger tracing faster and faster. "I'm sure of it." "We hid in a tree," Jojo chimed in. "We're smooth as shadows." "You're not smooth. You're bordering on stupid," their mother erupted angrily. "If they'd have spotted you, no telling what they would have done." "What are you doing up anyway?" Stella thought to ask her brother. He made a face. "I had to tee-tee, but when I got to the outhouse, I thought I heard voices, and I thought maybe somebody was out having fun, so I peeked around back, saw a fire across the pond." He paused and glanced up at his parents. "So then I got Stella." Papa banged his fist against the table. "And so both of you snuck out to look? Lord a mercy, we're not talking about fun or games." Stella froze. Then her father lowered his voice. "My job is to keep you all safe," he said slowly and evenly. "Best way to do that is to stay away from trouble, not bring it to us. You got that?" He fixed a glare on both of them. "Yes, Papa," they said in unison. "Last time the clan was active," Mama noted, "was when Billy Odom had what they call the accident." Stella's mind raced. The accident. Mr. Odom had fallen against the blade down the lumber mill. She'd been younger than Jojo at the time, but Stella remembered the furtive whispers and the tracings of fear on the grown-ups around her when it happened. As if he had read her mind, Papa nodded grimly. He was getting ready to start his own blacksmith shop. Clan made it clear that weren't going to happen. "Those men, tonight, they look like ghosts," Jojo whispered. "They look like they might be able to fly or something." To Stella, their father's face, etched with worry in the lamp-lit room, was more frightening than any ghosts. This was real. She slipped her foot under the table until it reached Jojo's and gave his a tap for courage. It gave her courage too, made her brave enough to tell something else that had been gnawing at her. "Papa," she began. "What?" Some of those men had their horses with them." Her father leaned toward her. "And?" he prompted. "I'm not sure, but I think maybe I might have recognized one of those horses. But it was dark, and I was kind of scared, and now that I think about it, I don't really know for sure." She traced a figure 8 in the wood. "What do you think you saw, honey?" her mother asked, reaching across the table to calm Stella's fingers. I might have seen one of those horses before," Stella said. "At night, one horse looks pretty much like all the others, though, doesn't it?" her father said. "Think now." His voice had taken on a different edge, and Stella felt even more nervous. She pulled a hand away from her mother's. "It seems like this horse had a saddle with a harness that sparkled, like it was catching the reflection of the flames," Stella said, trying to remember. "It seemed like the other horses didn't stand out. But this one did. Mama reached out again, this time to tap Papa's hand. Doc Packard dresses his horse real fine. Papa cleared his throat. I know. He stood up and began to pace back and forth, nodding and mumbling as he walked faster and faster. Finally he stopped and looked at them all. We have this knowledge now, and that gives us a little power. That's about all I got in my back pocket. So in a way, it's good you saw what you saw tonight, but this could be mighty bad, mighty bad. He ran his fingers through his thick hair and started back up, walking and thinking and walking. And then he stopped again. Stella, you and Jojo come with me. We got to wake the men down the lane. How come? Jojo asked. 'Cause I said so, boy. Papa was already headed for the door. I'll take the left side of the road. You two take the right. Tell them we got to meet. Our house. A half hour. Shake a leg now. And be careful, Mama admonished. Swift and silent, you hear me? Take the dog. Stella and Jojo dressed quickly and dashed out into the night. Dusty padded close behind. Stella could smell smoke in the distance. They ran to the Winston house first, pounding on the front door. A few minutes later, John Steve, a burly, brown-skinned boy, opened it cautiously. What are you all doing out here in the middle of the night? He asked, blinking at them. Tell your daddy to get to my house right away, Stella whispered urgently. There's trouble out by Kilkenny Pond. Clan. John Steve's face shifted from sleepy and annoyed to instantly alert. I'll tell him, he said, closing the door in a rush. Stella and Jojo then ran on to the house of the only Negro doctor in town, Dr. Hawkins, then to the school teachers, then to every other right-side house on Riverside Road. Folks reacted almost as quickly as the fire had spread up that cross. Men, still tucking their nightshirts into hastily pulled-on overalls, hurried down the road, a couple of them carrying shotguns. And in less than half an hour, Stella's front room was filled with the bristling anger of the black men of Bumblebee. Now we're going to think back at chapter 2, what we've just read. So if during this exercise you want to pause the video and just scroll back a couple of slides, you're more than welcome in order to find bits of the text that you'd like to concentrate on for making inference. So on the screen that we've put some inference stems up there in the box, and we've given you an example here about what inference could be. So part of the text here said the family sat huddled around the only table in the house with Dusty, their brindle hound, coiled underneath. Now the phrase only table in the house tells me that the family are poor, as they don't have much furniture in the house. This may be because Stella's father cannot work, as I know that during the 1930s, when this book was set, black men in parts of America found it difficult to find work due to racism in the country. So what we're doing is we're picking up a little part of the text, and we're using that little bit of the text to give us clues to something that's not actually said. So inference is that skill of looking at some words in the text and thinking what could be behind it, what's actually not said, and therefore what other clues does it give you to life for the family, or life for different characters in the book, or for just the way things happen to be at that particular moment in time. So here we've got another example of a part of the text, and it says a few lucky men got jobs at the lumber mill, the only real industry in town, but they weren't allowed to handle the saws, only the boards and the sawdust. Now there's only 2 sentences there, but in those sentences there's an awful lot that's said but not said, if that makes sense. Now you might want to pick out the phrase a few lucky men and think about Why would the men have been lucky? And as the lumber mill also is the only real industry in town, what does that say about what kind of jobs there are to do in the town of Bumblebee, North Carolina? And then thinking about that's the only place that they could go and get work in that area. But some of these men weren't allowed to handle the saws in order to cut up the wood. They could only handle the boards and the sawdust. Why would that be? So inference and using our inference skills is about thinking about what those clues are in that text. What is that telling us without actually being said in the text? And have a look at some of those inference stems, because it says the word blank tells me, and then you need to complete the sentence. Or these words make me think that. Or it could be wider than that. It might not just be a particular word. It might be the whole mood of the sentence or a chapter. And what is that mood telling you about the way characters are feeling or about the way they're living? So as I said earlier, if you like to go and skip back through the video, you can see the text on the screen. You can feel free to pause it at any moment and have a little think about what you might want to pick up on. It could be the slide previously when we looked at the lumber mill, or there could be another part of the text you thought, well, actually, that really stood out for me and I didn't quite understand what that was about. You might want to research some of the words around it and then have a little think about what is being said without it actually being said in the text. And think about what you can make inference about.